All right, we are live on YouTube.
Great. Welcome everybody to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. Today is Wednesday, April 30th, and we're here to learn about the Vermont Web Portal Board. And we'll go around and introduce ourselves, including our colleague who's joining us on Zoom and our committee assistant, and then we'll let you guys introduce yourselves. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester.
Richard Bailey, Lamont 2.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Michael Southwest Caledonia, to Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Darren Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Klebner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Oh, I guess I'm up. Scott Campbell, St. Johnsbury.
Jack Locker, committee assistant.
Great. And joining us?
John Kelly, Chief Staff, UPS.
Denise Ramsey, Secretary of ADS.
Jim Lipinski, Director of Shared Services for ADS, and also the current chair of the Web Portal Board.
Great. So thanks so much for joining us. We're a new committee with a new jurisdiction. And so we have perhaps, I'm sure belatedly for the three of you, we have all just learned about the Vermont Web Portal Board. So we wanted to hear from you. We wanted to start, if we could, by learning actually about the Vermont Web Portal, how it works and all that, and then the board. We did walk through the statute yesterday that established the Web Portal Board. We learned a little bit about its background and history, and we've got some questions that we can save that came from us, but also from our ledge council. And I don't think Rick is able to join us today, but we have his questions. So onward we go.
Okay, well, thank you for this opportunity. The Vermont's Web Portal is essentially vermont.gov and then anything below that. So going into vermont.gov and then clicking on any links, you're still within the web portal, with some exceptions. There are a few agencies that have kind of, they weren't having their needs met by the existing web portal. And so Secretary of State, for example, is one. So even though it might be Vermont.gov and then you think you're going into Secretary of State, you're leaving the web portal. But that's, for the most part, it's 95% of what is under Vermont.gov.
So what are the other agencies? So Vermont.gov, you said, is 95% of all of the homepage and any affiliated page, right? That home. And then what are the exceptions? Secretary of State, we learned about them yesterday.
And then there are some domains that have their kind of a special name. So VermontVacations.com is Agency of Commerce and Community Development. So they, because they're using it for marketing Vermont, they needed something that had a lot of pop and was, really dynamic looking. And so again, they didn't find their needs were well met within the Vermont Web Portal. So they're kind of off. But I would have to get a list of the exceptions from our web services director.
Okay.
I don't have I can't rattle them off because.
Oh, that's okay. I'm not sure it's important. The Secretary of State's probably the biggest one.
Correct. And
then Vermont Vacations, that certainly makes sense. So would the Secretary of State and Vermont Vacations, are they linked behind the scene, they're linked at the back end?
So if you go into vermont.gov and then you can go into government, and then there would be statewide officers, you'd see the Secretary of State there. So if you click on that link, now you're going into their site. The user doesn't know that they're leaving the portal when we talk about the portal.
So like the treasurer, the AG.
They are all in the portal. For example, the reason the Secretary of State has lots and lots of documents, more than most agencies, and the current functionality in the portal, each of those required linking it separately. So somebody would actually, if there was like 10,000 documents, somebody would have to take 10,000 documents and kind of say, here's the link to download that. And what they really need is the ability to go into a folder and see all the documents in that folder so that kind of reducing the overhead on their team. So those are some of the things that they ran into that drove them to having their own portal. Now, we are currently looking to renew the contract, and that's one of the requirements that's in the RFP is better functionality around managing large document sets. And my understanding is that the Secretary of State's office provided that we can give them what they're looking for, they'd be happy to come back. So
Great. Okay. Sorry to bog you down.
no worries.
Rep Campbell?
Well, you're probably going to get into this, but who is the contract with? And how much is the contract for, and all those questions?
Okay, so the contract is Tyler Technologies, and the way the contract is set up, it is this gets back to the statute that enabled the web portal, which is a self-funded model. So Tyler Technologies is receiving a portion of the funds that get raised through fees, mostly transaction fees, on the portal itself.
So they get some money, and I mean, it's meant to be revenue neutral or not to cost the state anything.
Correct.
So Tyler Tech gets some money, but does the state actually make some income from those grants?
Yeah, I looked at the in FY24, and they're on the same fiscal year. So this was ending ending June 30th. The gross revenue to the state, or the gross revenue coming through the portal, was 114,459,000. And of that, Tyler received 3.6 million, or approximately 3.1%.
And so Tyler Technologies, that's our contractor to host all of those expansive sites, and every transaction that runs through a Vermont.gov site, like buying a driver's license or well, I'm drawing a blank, but anything anybody would do on a Vermont.gov site that they pay for, like a permit or a fee or a driver's license, Tyler Technologies is capturing its percentage and reaping about 3.6 million per year from that. And is that the cost of their contract? It seems like it would be more than that. Or so is it entirely, do we then pay Tyler more than that?
No, that they are at least not that would go through ADS. I can't think of any other revenue that they would receive.
Okay.
It's a 3.6.
Okay. So the transaction fees cover the cost of web hosting from Tyler.
Correct.
Yeah. Rep Morrow.
I believe we were trying to get a hold of the list of those fees. Is that something readily available? And Rick was interested in that as well.
He was. I'm just looking at Rick's questions.
It's confidential.
Yeah, so that is confidential in the contract that we have with Tyler.
What is excuse me, man?
The detailed breakout of all the fees that are coming through the web portal.
Can I just clarify that response if you're okay with that?
Yeah.
The report itself is confidential, and under the binding terms of the contract, we'll have a general counsel review it more for Tyler to see what we can release. But as of right now, the report itself, based on the terms of the contract, is not considered to be public record. What would be the invoicing on the financing side of the various business offices that we.
Okay. I see you. But I want to get something clear in my mind before we move on. So I think we might be talking about the same thing from two different camera lenses. I think the report we're talking about, can we see? No, it's confidential. I'm envisioning that as literally a list of every single $56, $100 $300 transaction that's run through the website with, I would imagine, all kinds of information that we would need, that Tyler wouldn't want, that we would have to de-identify or something. So I'm imagining a massive printout of every single charge that ever ran through a Vermont.gov website being covered as confidential by a contract. It'd be interesting to see it disaggregated to, or not disaggregated, de-identified to the extent that we can. But then there's the question of, that we talked with Rick about, of what is Vermont charging for these fees? That may not be what you're talking about, but like, what do we charge for a driver's license? What do we charge for a boating fee? And that, we learned yesterday, used to be presented to JFO every year as one consolidated report from the executive branch, but it was too hard to wade through. And so now, unfortunately for us, although we're not really the fee setters in this committee, every agency now submits a fee report separately to JFO every year, and they're all on the JFO site. So there's what we charge as a state for all of our fees, which is like, we're welcome to look into it, but that's like a big ways and means deal. And then there's, can we see what's running through the website from Tyler? Sevilla, did I? Yeah,
You have to be.
Yes, I certainly do.
and I may not have boiled that down.
I would like some more specificity about what exactly is confidential. And also, I believe that we could go into executive session and that would then be something you could share with us, right?
We could, executive sessions come with a really important responsibility on our part not to share that information outside of executive session in any way with anyone. So if we ever consider that we need to go into executive session, I want to be really clear that we all understand the important guidelines around this.
But I have not had my question answered.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, which is specifically, what is it that's confidential? I want to make sure I'm clear. I'm not sure that I am clear.
I'm happy to answer that. Based on general counsel review shared with me yesterday, the terms of the contract list that any document marked as confidential received by Tyler would be covered under the NDA. So the report itself is tagged as confidential in its entirety. And so we are going through legal review right now and legal review with them on what we can release. And we, with the intent that we would like to share that information.
Okay. And so that report details the revenue that is coming from the web portal and from which Tyler is
And what
being
site it's
compensated.
associated with and the amount that is taken in, the amount that the agencies receive or the state receives, the amount that Tyler does. In most of the transactions, it's zero for Tyler. $3.6 million to host an entire environment of this kind, including the police forces, including PCI compliance, the auditing behind PCI compliance, all of that. And the transaction fees that they have to pay for those transactions that comes out of that $3.6 million that they are losing money on their contract with the state.
So, I mean, I certainly understand the need to keep, your competitor, what you're charging confidential. But we also have an oversight duty. So I'm glad to hear that we're working to make sure that we're going to have access to it.
And it's a legacy contract. This is the one that we're looking at with signed back. And so Bulletin 3.5 is requiring an update, which is why we're in an open RFP stage.
Thank you.
Oh, Rick Bailey. Okay.
Just a clarification, what was the 110 million collected is the, all like license fees and stuff going through that portal or?
Everything that has a user fee associated with it.
Okay,
It's $114.
of all the agencies, EMD, Secretary, so, okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Mark.
just wanted to get a little clarity on this contract. So these are money that Vermonters are paying on a public portal to a government agency. And that information is deemed confidential currently. Okay, that's fundamentally problematic. My point of view. So the contract is being renegotiated currently or set to be in the coming years?
We're in an
or
open RFP right now.
Open RFP.
So the transactions being confidential is actually aligning to PCI compliance. And so the PCI compliance requirement did just update the 4.0. The master agreement through BGS with Tyler on that 06, that confidentiality is really about, this isn't public record. And so confidential doesn't mean that the state doesn't see it. It just means that it's restricted. So the chair's comment around executive session and what's allowable and what's not is what we're getting general counsel to confirm. And Tyler's been very helpful in working with us, but we don't want to be in a position where we violated contract and put the state in a bad position.
Yeah. And what is the timeline on the RFP? When are you hoping to,
It's active right now, so
by next year or something? Yeah.
Rep Southworth, and then I see Scott.
Confidentiality piece be due to PII that's gained through that transaction.
there's many aspects of it, yes.
Rep Campbell.
Thank you. So Secretary Riley Hughes started to talk about, or did talk about, what we're actually getting for $3.6 million. I couldn't really hear her. Is it just hosting, or what exactly does that pay for?
Sure. So that is, it's the hosting. It is the development of the templates. It's the, it's the PCI compliance. They are part of the larger financial services industry. So when they're collecting fees and they're moving there, now they're paying fees downstream. So it is the sum total of everything that is needed to keep Vermont.gov online. It's the system administrators, it's the backup, it's the disaster recovery sites. That if one was to go down, we wouldn't see Vermont.gov go dark, things like that. So it's the complete picture.
And what does PCI stand for?
Payment card industry.
Okay.
So this is the rules set up by organizations like Visa, MasterCard, that govern the privacy around transactions that involve credit cards.
Right. And what is the term of the contract we're under with Tyler Technologies right now?
It is running out. I don't know the exact date that it ends, but it is running out within a year, which is why we are in procurement right now.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, how long has the contract been? Have they always been the contractor on this?
So the current contract, 2006, is it? So the original contract was with a company called Vic. Vermont.
Vic, you said? Sorry.
Pardon me?
You said Vic?
Vic, VIC. And they were purchased by a company called NIC, and NIC was purchased by Tyler Technologies. So there is it's essentially the same firm, but ownership has changed over the years. And I think this is going back to the establishment of the Web Portal Board. But the current contract, did I hear you say 2006 is?
2006 was the master that we're looking for.
Okay.
It's a 10-year contract then?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And obviously you're going out to open bid right now with the RFP. That would include Vermont-based businesses as well as Tyler looks like a multinational.
Correct. It was yes, it was, we followed all the bulletin 3.5 procurement rules in putting out the RFP.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah,
So the 3.6 million is a percentage of all the transactions of the 114 million. It's a chunk of that. So when you pay $140 for driver renewal, they get a chunk of that.
And I wouldn't say that there's like this 3.5 or 3.1% applied to every single transaction. I think there may be, some things may be, it's a $2 fee for this transaction. But when you take it all in total, it works out to 3.1%.
Thank you.
did you have additional testimony that you're going to walk us through, or we've got a little list of questions from Ledge Council, but I don't want to interrupt your flow, although we already have.
Oh, no worries. I think happy to take your questions. I think.
Okay. Yeah, Ledge Council had wondered, let's see, are we able to see the contract with the current vendor? Can we see the contract?
I don't
We
think
will look
that.
into that.
Pardon me?
We would look into that, but I believe so.
Okay. And then what state websites are governed or managed through the web portal, or which aren't? We already talked about that, I think. Is the vendor paid directly from transactional fees, or does the state entity temporarily hold the money and then release it to the vendor?
So they collect the fees because they're running the infrastructure. So when a transaction goes through, let's say it's a driver's license renewal, and the full amount would come to them because they're processing the payment. Then they're taking the portion that's due to the state and making that payment to the respective agency. I looked into this yesterday with our CFO, and those payments do not come through ADS. They would go to the individual agencies. So don't have a lot of visibility into what that looks like, is it quarterly or monthly, but
So that would be similar to the way the vehicle inspections fees work with DMV, if you're familiar with them.
not familiar with
Because the vendor takes it in and then transfers to DMV.
I believe Commissioner Collier is going to give me this afternoon to share those details.
I didn't hear that. What was that?
Commissioner Collier is going to be coming in this afternoon to share those details.
Okay.
Rep Campbell?
There we go. Yeah, I just wanted to review what you said about total revenue and how that all works again. Yeah, I think you said 14 point something million total revenue, and 3.6 is what goes to Tyler Technologies. So is that revenue? That revenue is the fees associated with the card processing, not that excludes the money that is actually going to, say, DMV for licensing. Is that correct?
yeah, it's 114.5 million.
114.5. Oh, okay.
And then they take in the FY24, they took approximately 3.1% of that, or 3.6 million.
So 114.5 million, that must include total revenue, including the
Yes.
the driver's license fees and registration and what, everything, right?
Right. There's a lot that goes through. Driver's license fees are the ones that we all know about. But for example, if there was a settlement through the Attorney General's office, and there was a payment that had to be made to the Attorney General, that would be something that would go through as well. So.
Okay. And it sounded like, I think Secretary Riley Hughes said that 3.6 is actually at that level of revenue to Tyler, that they're actually losing money on this. Is that correct?
The cost, correct, the cost of hosting the volume of what we're talking about and having the compliance auditing resources and technology in place would far exceed that fee that they are taking in.
Do we have an estimate of what those costs should be, or what we should be prepared to pay for web portal hosting?
Given that we're in an open RFP, I don't think that that would be in our best interest just to share that at the moment. But I would ask that we could potentially come back after.
Okay.
We're not in a competitive bid situation.
Okay, but you do have an estimate of that.
Yes, we have a rough estimate.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I can think of right this second. Thank you.
And if I could share details, the majority of the fees are invoiced monthly to the agencies. Tyler is collecting the statutory fee and reimbursing it to the agency and then billing the agency at the end of the month. So that's basically that transaction that happens. So the agencies are receiving the funds. They are sending the minimum amount to Tyler. When I say we don't see those transactions, those aren't coming through our business office. Those are coming through the various business offices, which could also explain why that annual report has become so complex. I anticipate once we go live with Workday that should be a lot easier because that could be automated.
Okay. Let's see here. So, alrighty, so that we're getting to, so I'm just still working through questions, and then as we talk about the duties of the board, I had some questions of my own, but all right, so the vendor, okay, we talked about how the vendor's paid, how much the vendors is earning from this, and is this amount reported anywhere, which is what I think we've just been talking about. Okay. All right. And then let's talk about the duties of the board. Because I've got, as we go through kind of the duties of the board and how you guys work and how you meet, I had some questions about that as well that we flagged yesterday during testimony.
Okay, so the board, they're required to meet twice a year. Typically, they meet 3 to 4 times a year. This, in the past 12 months, they've already met 6 times. And that's because we're in this recompete. So I would equate the board to functioning similar to a school board. We set the vision, we provide oversight, we set the guardrails. But much like a school board working with a superintendent, we are, delegating to the web services director and ADS to kind of handle the day-to-day management. We do get the reports from Tyler. We look at those over. Tyler is usually doing a presentation in our meetings where we can ask questions about things that have been going on. This year has been just a little bit different with our cadence because we've had a lot of meetings to kind of develop the requirements. So it's impractical for a board that is bound by open meeting law to be on the front lines of running a procurement, because every time we would meet would be warned and things like that. So, but we did work together to come up with the requirements. We passed those off to the web services director, and members of the board, myself included, were closely involved in the RFP. So, for example, I mentioned Secretary of State had problems dealing with the large number of files. So that's one of the requirements that we're looking for. Is that in the new contract, we want to see functionality that allows this to be done within the portal, available to everyone, and not not driving people to other solutions because we're not able to meet their needs. So I think that once we'll be meeting to, once we get, we're in that that very confidential phase of the procurement where the bids are in. So very, can't say a whole lot. Once we get past that, I think we'll end up back into our regular cadence of 3 to 4 meetings a year.
Okay. I'm just looking at your duties. We ran through these yesterday. And I wanted to make sure I understood the setting of the charges. So the self-funded portion of it is clearly set out in statute. I think we all understand that now, how that works. And then your mission or purpose is also to establish charges for the services it provides. So does that mean in the contract with Tyler, you're determining how much they're going to earn for the services that Tyler provides? Is that what that language is about?
So this language, and I think going back to like, if you looked at the website as it existed when it was first stood up 19 years ago, you would see things like renewing a driver's license, and then it would say $2 convenience charge. And that used to be fairly common. And nowadays, you don't see that anymore. Everybody kind of expects it. And so I've been on the board for 3 years, and there haven't been any requests to change fees because it's all being done kind of behind the scenes, in that it's $65 or whatever it is today to renew a driver's license. If I do it online, it's $65. If I walk into the DMV office, it's $65 if I mail in a check. So there's not really a convenience fee that's added in the sense that it was originally anticipated. So the way I interpret that part of the statute is back in the day when it was $2, if it was to go to $2.50, that's something that would have to come to the board and the board would approve it. But now that we've kind of moved away from that model where it's the fee is the same, regardless of online or in a building, that's taking place. If there are fee changes, it's between Tyler and the agency. Yes.
So, but there's no fee if somebody's coming in person, right? I mean, so if it's 65 in person, 65 online, Tyler's not making money when you come in person.
Correct.
So there is in fact a fee for online.
I don't get that.
Well,
It's just not passed through to the customer.
Right. The agency is absorbing
Oh.
the cost.
But if you do it online, the agency isn't staffing somebody in an office. So the portal is essentially a overhead of renewing the licenses. And so, I mean, yeah, it's just, you can pay cash and they put it in the drawer, or you use your MasterCard, and MasterCard's credit card, excuse me, the credit card bank's gonna get a call of handling your money, but nobody steals the credit card information. So the drawer's full at the end of the day.
So, so you're saying that you think that statutory language is like a vestigial thing that refers back to the old school convenience fees that would, so if it were to pay online, you're going to pay $67 and here's your $2 convenience fee. But if you walk in to the DMV and write a check, it's going to be 63 or whatever. So this is,
No,
no,
it's,
I got that wrong.
it's $68 or 70, whatever it is. You pay $78, whether you pay and renew through the portal and get they got to send you a new license, but registration, they may email you a new reg. But the $78, the fee stays the same. It's independent.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I understand how it works now.
But
What I meant was that language maybe refers to a way of doing business that we don't use anymore.
Yeah.
Rep. Sibelia?
Yeah, so there is a fee for online. Hold on, there is a fee for online transactions. The legislature is not involved in any oversight of that whatsoever, or understanding of how much of it is collected. That is something that's negotiated between the executive branch and the vendor. No, is it just billed? Do you just have to accept whatever they decide?
So I know Commissioner Collier is going to be speaking about this in his testimony at 3. Legislature is setting those fees. And I believe it's the DMV committee, is there a DMV committee or transportation committee? They're involved in this. So
Setting
this
the
is where
transaction fees? We're talking about transaction fees. We're not talking about the cost of a driver's license. We are talking about the transaction fees.
That's what,
So the notion of it being the same, whether you go in or you pay it online, but Tyler receives a cut
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
If it's online and not if it's in person. And so there is in fact an online fee. We're just not involved in it. Am I misunderstanding that?
That makes sense to me. Tyler's taking a cut.
Which is, and I don't argue whether
Yeah, yeah.
it's good or bad.
Just
It's
understanding.
we are not a part of that.
Right. And that's why I was trying to understand this language around established charges for the services it provides. So I was just trying to figure out if that just has to do with the Tyler contract or if that has to do with this old notion of a convenience fee. It sounds like they're related. Yeah.
Rep Allen was ahead of me in line.
Yeah. Brett.
No, I think
Sorry.
I'm upset.
Yeah. But to your point that we're not involved in setting the fees when it's online, I think we're also not involved in setting the hourly pay rate or the overhead, at least it's for the buildings that the DMV occupies, that we have to pay when someone does it in person. To Rep Allen's point that there's operating costs either way you do it, same gross revenue, different operating costs, and we're not involved.
I think that we approved the Pay Act, right? And I don't know about buildings, but I mean, very clearly, like fees is something the legislature should be a part of. And I think we have an obligation. So I would like to hear specifically from Rick about this.
Could I jump in 1 second?
Yeah. Rep Campbell.
So it occurs to me that that the fees that we're paying for a web-based transaction is more analogous to the fees that we pay to the credit card company directly. So if somebody comes into the DMV office and pays for their license or registration with a credit card, we pay a fee for that transaction. And if we're charging the same, whether you pay by credit card or by check, the cost to the DMV is different for processing a check than it is for processing a credit card, right? But we don't have any we as a legislature don't have any visibility into what the credit card fees are. Isn't that a more analogous situation? I'm posing the question. Actually, I have one other question while you're pondering that, Rep. Sibilia, and that is, when is this RFP due, by the way? And when are we going to know what the results of it are?
So the RFP was issued, the response date has passed. We have our responses and they're being evaluated as we speak. It's hard to put a timeline on these things, but I would hope that we're in a position where we'll have a decision made sometime in the summer. Hopefully sooner, but
Okay.
I do want to just remind of information that I had shared last time regarding the web portal board, that 2 members of the committee, one is the Senate legislative member and one is a House legislative member. Those 2 seats, at least for the last 10 years, have not been filled.
Well, they have been though. That's the thing.
Houses.
Yeah. Sibilia was appointed last summer.
Interesting.
So maybe the loop
Good.
maybe the loop circle didn't get closed.
I think you're right. It didn't. get
never got
closed.
that info.
But that's great to know because all members of the web portal board are the ones doing this work. So that visibility and the discussion around fees and the obligations of the board do have and should have representation from both House and Senate. And there is a May 1st meeting.
Yeah. It has to be a member who serves on JITAC. So, I think last summer, Speaker Krowinski appointed Rep. Sibilia, and I don't know about the Senate side.
We'll have to
Yeah.
close the loop.
Okay, yeah, Rep. Bailey?
So is it my understanding you're saying that Tyler's losing money now?
Knowing the industry, it's hard to see how they can be profitable doing all that they provide for $3.6 million or 3.1%. It's
But that's your assumption. Tyler hasn't come to you and whined about renegotiation.
They have not, they have a long-standing multi-decade relationship with the state and they are not complaining. But we have had enough conversations to know that our information is accurate.
And presumably they're among the pool of proposals you've got, and presumably they have, you can't say, but I'm just assuming that they rejiggered it so that they start making money.
I would say where it shows up, they absolutely are meeting all the requirements of the contract. We have no concerns about their performance. But where I think it shows up is we're not seeing the latest and greatest technologies in Vermont.gov, hence why VermontVacations.com went someplace else and things like that. So it's a unintended consequences. I think it's driven from the self-funded model. So we are limited by what can be reasonably raised through fees. And so the vendor has to, make decisions as to what they're able to provide. Again, no concerns about the performance, but I think it does. That's where we would see the effect.
Sorry, I don't know who's first. I'm sorry. Rep. Howland and then Rep. Morrow.
So would it be your opinion that the total cost to the state is greater because of the other two agencies, Secretary of State and Vermont Vacations, going out to a different portal server? Nobody does anything for nothing, so somebody's paying somebody to put a webpage out there.
If those other agencies were within the portal, then the fees would be coming through, but it's plausible, but I have no evidence that would support that either way.
But if you're looking at a vacation spot and you're not selecting a vacation, no money changes hands, no fees get collected. So my vacation got to pay for it somehow.
That's I can see where.
And somebody paying the Secretary of State's information's got to be supported somehow. So those agencies pay for that with a different line item on their budget rather than this money coming through and transportation looks at net revenue from driver's licenses or registration.
I guess answering your question in a different way, I think if we could provide for everyone in a single portal, that would be the most advantageous to the state.
Rep. Morrow.
Just in broad picture, can you explain how the RFP has got to overcome some of these self-funded model inadequacies in terms of performance that you just.
So we put the RFP. One of the ways, if you look at the way we're currently operating, we need a company that is a web developer and hoster and also a financial services company. And so that really narrows the pool. of, companies that do both of those things. We put out the RFP in a way, and again, we don't know that this is actually doable because it would probably require a statute change. But we put out the RFP saying we are looking for firms that can do the hosting and provide the financial services, but we'll also accept bids from someone that just does the hosting and somebody that just does the financial services. And how we can move forward depends on just a lot of nuance in negotiating contracts and things like that. Because we still got to fit into the self-funded model. So is there a way that we could have somebody providing just the portal? They plug in the financial services piece. That it just gets very complicated, but we're trying to look at ways because, kind of the theory is that a company that if you could just take the two pieces separate, each one is going to be more competitive than having this really small universe of companies that do both. It's hard. That's what we're wrestling with as we're starting to evaluate. Like, is there a way that we can put two together to make one, or do we still have to go one? And some of the other things that we have done, though, we did ask for just functionality that has come up over time that was not meeting everybody's needs and resulting in going elsewhere or workarounds. So better ability to manage large file sets, also kind of a higher end template. So you have a basic template that is, gets the job done, friendly to citizens. But then for those marketing pieces, a template that is has a little bit more flash and, more, ability to kind of pull people in from a marketing point of view. So we've asked for those things in the as requirements in the current procurement.
Does the language I'm sorry, Rep. Campbell?
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering whether maybe you're going to ask this, Madam Chair, right now, from the first words you just said. Are there ways in which the way the statute is written now, requiring a self-funded portal, are there ways that inhibits the RFP that we're issuing, the way we're doing this? Would it be better to change the statute to a different model?
I think it does make it more difficult. It limits our choices, and anytime choices get limited, I think that works against us. Again, because we have to find firms that do both of these things. And both of these markets individually are very competitive. It's, again, 19 years ago, the web was new, and, this idea of doing government business over the web was new. And I think this was, just the best approach at the time. But it feels, today, I don't have any statistics, but I'm confident in saying that most people interact with government through a website and not going into a building. And so it would almost be like saying, well, we're going to have a self-funded model for buildings. Like there's a coin drop when you go in or something like that. It's flipped in 19 years. And we're still kind of bound by some language that made sense 19 years ago. I don't think it's the best approach today.
I'll just follow up on that because I had a similar question as Rep. Campbell about whether the way the statute is written would prohibit us from making a separate appropriation like the budget. If we had if $10 million dropped out of the sky, which I realize is not going to happen, but if we were able to make additional investments, whether the statute prohibits that, or whether you remember us making any any investments through the budget to boost, to boost the money we have available to improve the sides or
Yeah.
upgrade the sides.
I'm not-
That's a larger question, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm not aware of appropriations specifically for the web portal. I do
Okay.
believe it is all the everything that comes through the Tyler contract.
Okay, and there's also language in there that allows the web portal board to accept gifts and donations and grants. Have we ever?
Not in the 3 years that I've been on the board.
Okay. Yeah, Brett Moore.
So given this difficulty with self-funding model, did ADS come? I'm a new member, so I don't have any history here. Did ADS come to the legislature asking for a statute change to give ADS flexibility in this new?
We are working on that. We have put together our thoughts on what changes would make sense. I'm not sure where that's at. Is that
Nothing official.
so? Nothing official, but we are.
Yeah, I was referring to the last biennium, so that you could have this contract, more flexibility in the contract.
Where it really became apparent was once we started into this procurement and we started drafting the RFP and asking for all the requirements, and then, kind of making sure it aligned with the statute. And then we started to realize, we're not in the best position from a procurement point of view, and being able to we just have a very small.
I got it. Yeah.
Yeah, right, Tori.
Great learning about this board. When we had the statute up on the screen yesterday, I noticed that there was a paragraph around public input. Is that a role you're still playing?
We have public input on the agenda for every meeting. There's not a lot of we haven't been going out and doing surveys and things like that. We talked about this in one of our meetings last year, and just looking for ways to increase that. And it might be, even things like, we do get some information through the web portal. There are those surveys that I think we've all seen them when you go to the website, not every time, but every so often, would you click here if you'd like to contribute your thoughts. So we do get some information like that, but we did come to the conclusion that we should be thinking about ways that we can increase
Usability and it seems especially in terms of RFP that you would want to have some sort of, how are we doing?
And that is in the RFP, that usability standards and things like that.
So another question about the RFP and what you've learned in the process of putting together and the RFP and receiving responses. Would it make sense now to change the statute? Now, obviously, it's not going to happen this year, but change the statute next year so that you have the flexibility to get more competitive bids.
Yes, there are some, and this is kind of what we're thinking about right now. We could do a shorter contract if we anticipated that there would be some changes that would be advantageous to a procurement in a shorter cycle. I think we could possibly extend the current contract and get that. I think there's lots of paths available to us.
Well, would the board come back with a recommendation about that sometime this summer or something?
We certainly can do that.
That would be great.
Rep. Southworth.
Would it make more sense to do a 1-year extension or whatever is in the contract that's available to address this, to make it better all around for ADS to make it?
We're pursuing all avenues right now.
Chris.
Oh, great.
Right.
Well, he's a right.
Yeah.
All right. We must move along. Final questions? Yeah, Rep Bailey?
Do you think the two separate will be able to work together or they don't need to work together?
It's so common. Anybody that's doing financial services for e-commerce is plugging into websites, on a regular basis. And there's lots of standards. It's probably rare that if you look at e-commerce sites and things like that, that there's one company that's doing both the site and the financial transactions. So don't anticipate that would be a problem at all.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much
Thank
for
you
your
very much.
time. Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
All right, I think our next witness is here. So let's just move along. So on our agenda this morning, folks, Jack, if you could add this to the agenda, we have Rep Harrison and or McCoy, I'm not sure, but definitely Rep Harrison.
Yep, it's on the agenda.
Oh, great. They're coming in at 11:45 to quickly present an amendment they're offering on S50. So just to add that to your
Oh, you got the other.
add that to your thinking. Thank you. Yep. All right.
Let's see if you said.
Okay. Brett, Sevilla, can you get us started? I just have to run the rest of everything.
I got the door open.
Good.
It feels really hot.
It is hot in here.
It doesn't feel like it.
Here it is.
Well, temperature is all about sensation. Was it?
Yeah.
I printed your written stuff out really
Great, perfect. Thank you so much.
Older people who don't. Certainly.
Temperature control.
Oh, were we, somebody
Although
just asked, so
I didn't really notice.
we need the chair there so that we don't scare everyone.
Right.
Big slam the door. Good morning.
Hey, how y'all doing? Like this.
Chair James has stepped out briefly. She'll be right back.
Okay.
We are ready to roll right into your testimony.
Okay.
It is 10 o'clock in the Energy and Digital Infrastructure Committee. Please introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Chris Camp, the Executive Director of the Wyndham Regional Planning Commission. I'm a member of the Building Energy Code Working Group, have been since its inception. I represent the regional planning commissions on that body. And our primary role, I believe, was municipal governments have a role in implementation of the code. So I think that's why they wanted our input, along with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns as a seat. So I'll jump right into it. So like I said, I'm commenting. I think the reason I was asked to be here is to comment as a member of that working group. So I'm representing Vermont's 11 regional planning commissions and the Vermont Association of Planning and Development Agencies. You may also ask it's a logical question. What does a regional planning commission director, what experience do I have in that? Well, in Calvert County, Maryland, where I was deputy director of planning and zoning, oversaw the division of inspections and permits. That division was responsible for issuing building, grading, electrical, plumbing, and gas permits, and perform field inspections on these projects to ensure compliance with applicable codes. Types of inspections conducted by staff included building construction, electrical installation, plumbing installation, fire protection, and accessibility. I also know I grew up around the construction business in rural Southwest Virginia. My dad was a contractor and builder. My mom was a realtor, broker, and agency owner. And I also bring that up because as a human being, I lived through the challenges of that profession. I was there when the times were good, and I was there when we lost damn near everything. And so I understand, what a challenge the construction business can be. But I also saw just how,
my mom and dad, they started building spec homes, and then that trend allowed dad to leave Rose Aluminum, where he was a manager, become a full-time contractor and builder. Allowed my mom to go into real estate, because that period, right, when a lot of women were going from being full-time housewives and going into the business world. And so lived through that. So just have a lot of respect for it. So I'm going to offer the following comments on H181 and just the codes generally. VAPTA's primary interest, RPC's primary interest in the bill is to encourage increased building efficiency, but to do so in a way that does not put municipalities with little to no capacity in a position where they have a mandatory role in state regulatory administration. Requiring the filing of building of code compliance certificates with property records is a reasonable expectation. Requiring the towns to provide building energy code information when a building or zoning permit is applied for may be reasonable, but for reasons I'll get into, it may not lead to significantly greater code compliance. May also lead property owners to assume that municipalities have a much greater role in code compliance than they actually do, because they have any role at all. And the following comments are my own based upon my professional experience. Having a state code without statutorily assigned state agency responsible for interpretation, administration, enforcement could reasonably be expected to result in low code compliance. I just don't know how, just from a public administration perspective and practical perspective, I don't know how you reasonably expect a code to be implemented with nobody assigned responsibility to do it. And that would be anything, not just this. And then from practical experience, a code that's not interpreted, administered, and enforced can lead to ambiguity in practice. And that ambiguity can lead to conflicts, resulting conflicts between buyers and sellers, contractors and consumers, and residents and state and local government. And those conflicts can lead to unnecessary expenditure of time and money, including lawsuits that may not otherwise be necessary, where you wouldn't have that ambiguity. Any state agency or other entity tasked with this responsibility must be properly resourced, and this is a constant refrain, especially as within the Building Energy Code Working Group. As you know, there's been a lot of looking towards the fire marshal, fire safety to take this on. Whatever happens, if the code is going to continue to exist, whatever agency is responsible for taking this on needs to be properly resourced, as do the personnel, including training, outreach, education, because it's just necessary. So, and the other point I'll make is, and this is something that we really focused on heavily in Maryland. You know, time and construction is money. And so I know there are a lot of concerns about, any code requirements or code compliance for increasing costs of building. But one of the things that'll need to happen is being able, like, once a contractor says, hey, I'm ready for an inspection to happen, or I'm ready, or it needs to happen quickly. And what we did in Maryland was this was the early days. Now you can do it with a smartphone, but back then we actually put in the inspector vehicles a similar apparatus to what you would have in a police car, police vehicle, with being able, so that they would have their laptops there. They could go in, do the inspections, and go ahead and issue the permit right then and there, so the contractors could get back to work. And I'm sure this was when I was doing this. This was back in the early 2000s. That sounds weird, but you know what I mean. But now I'm sure there are all kinds of apps, and right, you got better cell connectivity and other things. But just the ability that when any kind of inspection or compliance is requested, get out there, look at it, make the approval or denial, but get it moving quickly. So, and with the Building Energy Code, it's not like a regular building code where they're going in and looking at structures and electrical and sprinkler and all that. So it's a little different dynamic. But I guess the main point I'm just trying to make is resource it to where things move quickly. You don't have a permit sitting on somebody's desk for a week or two. It's questionable whether requiring municipalities to provide energy code compliance information has a meaningful impact on actual code compliance. within approximately 40 towns in the state with no zoning bylaws, there may be no municipal permit required to build a home. You may just need a septic and well permit. And I do think in that case, I think A&R, don't hold me to this, but I think A&R has been directed to also provide building energy code information when they're issuing those permits. But for towns with zoning, the threshold as to when a permit is or is not required may not align with the energy code requirements. But in any case, there's so much variability among Vermont's nearly 250 municipalities that this certainly results in uneven execution of the statutory requirement. So I'm not saying don't make them do it. I'm just don't know if it gets you what you think you're getting. Because right now it feels like the assumption is, and probably to keep it inexpensive, right, was, okay, we're going to pass this building energy code. Municipality is going to be responsible for getting information out about that. And that's how we're going to administer the code. And I'm just saying the efficacy of that is probably questionable. Not knocking what y'all have done. I'm just offering this from a basic public administration perspective. I'm a House appointed member of the Climate Council representing municipal governments, and we often discuss greenhouse gas reduction measurements and reports. I think it makes sense, as the law says, that'd be in the interest of the state for the Department of Public Service to collaborate on the development of a methodology for calculating and reporting greenhouse gas reductions annually. Many climate action plan actions rely upon achieving greater building energy efficiency and reducing greenhouse gas production. With that said, I don't know how onerous a task this might be, and such work by the department would need to be properly and sufficiently resourced. And this is again another thing that keeps coming up in the building energy code discussions about, like, hey, if you're going to ask an agency to do something, we got to actually have the resources to. I won't be doing it, but I'm not an expert.
No, I understand, like, the anger you said. Okay. I need a copy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our national. Okay.
Thank you. It's surprisingly difficult to hear when there's conversation in the hallway.
Sorry about that. I don't need to.
Yep,
Did cool off. That was nice.
it did go off. Yep. Okay.
Okay. I have, and also I just have concerns. I've raised this a lot, and this is just based on my experience overseeing inspections and permits, and just having some, a fair amount of knowledge just growing up in the business and just in our own home. I just have concerns about the existence of building energy codes and the absence of residential building codes, because, building systems all interact with each other, right? And so it's challenging enough with new construction to get it right with the existing, and then when you have existing construction, especially in our older homes, it's even more challenging. And and especially with the higher and higher level of performance that we're expecting from building codes, the room for error where especially if you have moisture coming into a wall or ceiling or a roof or something, when it's so well sealed, has just pretty profound implications for both new construction and existing construction. And it just concerns me that, especially for, single family detached residential where there's no code required that has to meet. Yes, I know licensed electricians and licensed plumbers and others do their own code work. They're supposed to be doing work to code. But, I just think there's benefits to having eyes on what's in the wall before it all gets sealed up. And for existing buildings, also, just having the other built. I mean, the first house we had when we moved to Vermont was built in 1838. Honestly, I think that house was designed to breathe. It was called a Vermont plank house. So you have like these massive 3 to 4 foot, 3-inch thick boards that run from the plate to the top sill. And then you have the larger timbers framing the outside of the house. And then on that single board, you would have the windows set in, and you had the clapboards on one side of the board, and you had the lath work on the inside. There was no wall cavity, right? It was, when the wind would hit that house, you couldn't tell except for the storm windows moving. But you can imagine if you start sealing up, in this case, a board, it's not even a wall cavity. You got to be careful because you don't want to introduce conditions where rot might again. We had personally used the Neighborhood Heat Squad to do an Energy Efficiency Vermont to do an energy audit. They recommended doing what's called a hot attic, where you seal the roof, you seal the rafters. And of course, our roof rafters were split logs with bark on one side. And it still made me an awful nervous, to do the vapor seal and put that spray insulation up there. Cause I was just thinking, man, this house has been like this for, 180 years. Is this what we're really supposed to be doing? It did help, make a more warmer, comfortable house, but I was also just kind of in the back of my head going, I don't know. So anyways, I just worry about, just the absence, having the building code, especially with residential, in the absence of, or energy code in the absence of a building code. And then I'm educated as a landscape architect. I have a master's in landscape architecture. After I left Maryland, I was on the landscape architecture faculty at Mississippi State, taught neighborhood scale design, and then also taught site planning for the School of Architecture. And one of the things I just want to note, site grading, which is usually part of the residential building code, has huge implications for comfort, health, and durability of a home, especially when it comes to moisture management. It can make a difference between a house that stands the test of time or one or one that eventually rots or must either be constantly maintained or demolished. And these days, really, grading should take into account current projected climate conditions characterized by frequent and more intense precipitation events, extreme wet, dry soil events. And I bring this up because when we were looking at homes when we first moved here about 15 years ago, and then we bought another home in 2020. The number of homes that I would go into, especially like with new additions, where water was clearly running right into the back of the house. I don't mean from a brook or anything, I just mean running down slope. And you go down into the basement, you don't just see where water has, like groundwater has risen and fallen in the basement. You see like where sediment has moved in that basement. I mean, that house is probably it's not going to be particularly durable. I don't know why this happens. We have, I think, more excavators per capita in Vermont than probably any other state in the nation. But again, I think it's the absence of just kind of any requirements or any eyeballs out there about, because one of the things that a code can help do is actually inform the homeowner or the contractor about what the best practice is. It's not just a regulatory tool, it's an educational tool. And I just think we would have more durable housing if we did actually have just some basic site planning review requirements that included what the grading is around a home, for new construction or additions or other things. Because if we're trying to get at energy, and I'm going to get to my last point here, I know there are concerns with code requirements enforcement as it relates to the cost of construction. However, we have to give consideration to the future costs associated with construction that does not meet coding. We've had the personal experience in our house. Our current house was built in 1974, so by a lot of Vermont standards, a brand new home. We love it, but the garage was built without any steel reinforcement in the concrete. It was built without frost walls. It was built without any gravel put underneath the slab. And so when we bought the home, we knew this, but we had very few options during the pandemic to what we could buy. So the garage floor was all cracked, heaved, and broken. And so we bought the house knowing that, but like before we could replace the masonite siding, we had to also fix the garage floor, so everything would be cattywampus. So because somebody saved, when building code would have prevented this, and we knew what to. My dad was building homes in '74. He knew what you put. He knew the standard. You put steel and concrete, and you put frost walls in. So for saving $4,000 in 1974, I got to spend $50,000 removing the existing foundation and putting in a new one. And you may say, well, what does that have to do with energy? Well, concrete is one of the biggest greenhouse gas emitters. And so we had to destroy the concrete that was poured in the first place and then pour a whole other floor just because somebody cut corners in 1974. And that can still easily happen today. And so as a state, part of the conversation we need to have is what are the relative costs? And what are the costs of code compliance? And they do it in New Hampshire and Maine. They figured it out. I've lived in most every state I've lived in had building codes. They still built houses. They were still affordable. So it just seems like, we're Vermont strong. We can probably figure out how to do this, and it's not going to be the end of the world. But I think that, again, the key is going to be resourcing it, getting it done in a timely manner. It can't be permits or sitting on desks forever. And I don't have the magic solution to all this. I'm just offering my perspective on just having lived in this world professionally and personally. One other thing I'll just note is even in our older home, built in 1838, right? It says later retrofitted with plumbing and electrical. The stuff that we found when we got into that house, like different gauges of wire running into each other that would never be allowed by code. Same thing with pipes, right? Everything was built with bits and pieces. I know we can say it's the Vermont way or the country way or whatever, but when it creates hazards or ultimately it results in like diminishing the durability of a home, because somebody's paying at some point. And do you pay it up front or do you pay it on the back end? And to me, that's just a realistic question we have to ask. I don't know the answer to all this. I'm not saying, and probably giving you more information than you want, but it's just some practical considerations. And I absolutely, we absolutely need to do everything we can to keep the prices of homes manageable, but we also have a responsibility to the public to make them safe and durable. And from an energy perspective, ensuring that they age well, right? So even with new construction, with the increased performance, right, making sure that you get that right so that you're not losing the energy benefit by having to rip a new roof off or rip a new wall out because there was some failure in the weatherization and insulation because there was some other issue related to the framing or the sheathing or the plumbing or the ventilation, the air circulation. So I'll stop.
Rep Campbell.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Chris, for coming in and offering this testimony. It's always really interesting to hear from you. And of course, I completely agree with everything you just said, but I'm going to be the devil's advocate now and say, and ask you, what is the quality of building that Vermont builders typically are providing now? I think many builders would say, we're providing a good product. We try hard to build quality, quality construction, and we think we are. Do you have any sense of that?
The sense of
what the quality of construction is right now? There's definitely a lack of energy code compliance because some builders don't even know about it, and but there is a standard of construction that is sort of difficult to pin down, but it's better than it used to be. We have better materials. People have a better idea how to install a window so it doesn't leak. People have a better idea about insulating walls. So we're building, I think, typically better insulated, more airtight structures. Are they good enough? I guess that's what I think. My friends who are builders who would oppose any more robust enforcement or penalties for energy codes, that's what they would say.
Yeah, I guess so. Representative, I don't know that I'm in a great position to answer that because I'm not out. In fact, we still don't see a lot of new home construction our region relative to others. So I'm not a great. I probably the fire marshal or even municipalities that do actually have adopted building codes and are seeing what's getting built. They would be better in a better position to answer what they're seeing about what's getting built. I guess I don't know. kind of channel my dad, I guess, for a second here. If they're building to a high standard, then meeting code shouldn't be a problem because, and you can, right, you can amend, right? A lot of communities adopt the International Building Code, but you can amend it to reflect local conditions. You can amend it a lot of different ways to make it better meet what your statewide situation or local situation is. So it's not like, so you can change the standards to reflect what the expectation is in your community. But I absolutely get, like, it's another step in the process, right? It's another permit that they have to apply for. There's potentially more time. I would also imagine, I don't know, if I was building homes, I probably don't want somebody coming in and looking at my work, because I'm proud of my work, and why should anybody have to come in and look at it because I'm doing a good job? So I guess the short answer is I'm not in the best position to answer that, but to me, it's just something we need to nail down, as far as what the expectation is, and, engage with the public on what their expectation is when they're buying a house. Are they expecting? Do they know that maybe a building code wasn't applied to this? I think, Representative, I think it's fair to say that even some of the legislators and other people on the working group weren't aware we didn't have building codes for single family residential.
Oh yeah, I think that's true. It also seems to me that quite a lot of this, and we've talked about this in the working group as well, is a matter of education more than additional cost. It's more a matter of technique than it is cost. I mean, there are some discrete things that cost more, like installing a mechanical ventilation system, a powered ventilation system, but a balanced powered ventilation system. But most of how to construct a wall, for example, is just knowing how to manage moisture migration and building a wall that has minimum wetting potential and maximum drying potential, right? So that's not necessarily a matter of cost; it's a matter of knowledge. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, Rep. Morrow.
Congratulate you working the word cattywampus into your testimony.
No, done that
I
yet.
would like to echo that. You got a little nod of approval from me.
I wrote it down. I don't know how to spell it.
I know how to spell it. Yes. Did you say CATTYWAMPUS?
I think of WAMPUS is the way I would spell it.
Yeah, cattywampus.
Yeah, perfect.
All right. Yeah, Rep. Klepker and then Rep. Allen.
I think 3 observations. One is that, what you're talking about is very consistent with a lot of what we have heard in terms of the balancing upfront costs, higher upfront costs with lower operating costs. And I think that extends to building a house. And also balancing today's needs with tomorrow's needs. Because, I mean, like you said, someone saved $2,000 and cost you $50,000. But if you don't have $2,000 today, you don't have $2,000, and you can build a thing that's going to work for you and your family, and knowing that a future owner will need to invest in houses as well. Overall, people for our community to do it right the first time, but we don't really have a mechanism for either for capturing the benefits communally or for paying the cost communally. And the last thing I wonder about, we've heard a lot about the concerns about wrapping houses and trapping moisture in walls, and how people who don't know how to do it right build stuff and the wall rots in 10 years. I've seen pictures of walls that rotted in 10 years, heard about siding flying off and so forth. And I do wonder how much is known about the interaction between that and heat pumps, which dehumidify the interior air, and whether code has evolved to the point where it incorporates that moisture flow as well as all the other ones.
Yeah, I don't know. I would surmise, but the other issue too, right, is there's how a home's designed to operate and there's how the users actually operate it. And there's a difference between who especially if it's new construction, right? The current owner versus who knows, who maybe was a custom build even, and they know how that's supposed to work versus who comes in subsequently. And, it's just, and maybe does maybe opens the windows more often than they should, or, defeats the systems that are so,
Yeah.
right? As you increase that level of performance, as houses become smarter, you might defeat those systems. And the other thing, I know from just practical experience, especially like, and not to keep going back to my family, but this is something I know, when dad was building houses and mom was selling them, there was a lot of experimentation with new house wraps and, composite materials and new insulations and other things. And so the builders were putting a lot of faith into the engineering of those materials they were putting into the home. And so it may not always be on the builder, right? It could be a failure of the wrap or maybe not in the engineering of it, but like even the manufacturing of that batch or something. And so again, I'm not knocking the energy code. I'm just saying it's just something to be aware of, I think, as we go towards higher and higher and higher performance, that your margins for error probably get, and I'm saying this as a layperson. I'm not an engineer. I'm not in the trades. I don't know what the latest publications and research is saying, but I would just imagine, right? It's like a higher performance automobile, right? My 67 MGB, I could fix it on the side of the road, but if I had an EV and it clumped, if I had a Tesla and it clumped out on the side of the road, I'd probably just have to throw my hands up and I don't know what the heck is going on. I'm gonna be out there with a soldering iron and a piece of wire to fix it. But with my MG, a wrench, duct tape, electrical tape, whatever, I could probably fix it. One last quick other thing. We've talked a lot about new construction, and to Representative Campbell's point, part of my concern actually has to do more with like renovations and additions, especially to older homes, and like making sure you got the structural tie-ins proper, the grading, the electrical, so because that's really where a lot of our work is happening. The building energy code applies to those situations too. Sorry.
Well, we asked the same question yesterday, or I did, about what portions of the energy code aren't being observed. And you mentioned about the stepping of construction through the development years. One thing, if you get a outside wrap, one manufacturer says it's not supposed to be exposed to the sun for longer than 24 hours. And how often do you see the wrap, that particular brand of wrap up there for weeks, months, or sometimes years? But and I tried to review a little bit of the code, and you can't. It took me 4 years to get an engineering license. All right. And so I had 4 years of exposure to that code. It's tough to pick up the energy code trying to review it in 1 weekend. But it does have, one of the things was the cubic feet per minute that are required for the number of, I think it was size on bedrooms in the home. And I haven't been in a lot of the homes, but I don't see mechanical air exchangers. So does the Vermont builder say, well, I don't need that, and not comply with that portion? Because if you're going to build the envelope, you've got to have no rescuer goes with the ambulance without an airway if the victim's airway is blocked.
Yeah, I'm not an expert, but yeah, I mean but yeah, those are my concerns around the codes generally, and that's part of why it makes me nervous. And again, I'm not pushing for building, but it's not in this bill. It's one of the tasks of the working group is to consider whether or not it makes sense. But to your point, for some homes, if the only code we're expecting to follow is the energy code, but we don't have expectations on all the other structural systems and everything else, it just makes me look over.
One testified foundation insulation was a comment. And so the point is that if you're only 54% compliant, if you're not compliant on any one of the portions, you're non-compliant. Is it a minor portion or is it a major portion? And there's a lot to learn here for a lay person who's just tried to introduce it since it's been introduced here.
That's really close.
Yeah, first story.
Quick question. I'm wondering if your work group talks at all about, checking out how well is the building performing? Like, do we have any kind of a market for that in Vermont? Like, how do you get, you're a new homeowner, you want to move in, but you want to make sure that, their exchange is working. Like, who comes and tests things so that you know that it's as intended?
I guess you'd have to hire that as part of your inspection process, if you care, if you even know to ask about it. And yeah, I don't know. We've only had a couple of building inspections in Vermont. And I think they did a fine job. They're looking for, I think, more of the typical stuff, right? Like, is it a leaky roof? Is the siding coming? It's not, they're not out there with blower doors and, they're doing a mold test, but that is just the standard mold test that probably most homeowners could do on their own. So I don't know. So I guess, if it's a higher performance home, you'd have to hire a building inspector who can really test all those systems and tell you what you're buying.
What you're asking about, Reptori, is what's called building commissioning. Making sure that all the systems are operating the way they're designed, especially the ventilation system, but also heating and, and all that. So there are people who do that. And if you're going to have the expectation of a very high performance building and you're going to pay for that, then it certainly makes sense to also pay for commissioning at the end of construction to be sure that you are getting what you're paying for.
All right. Great. Super. Any additional questions for Chris? Chris had, as always, really helpful.
Sure.
So we have some choices. Our next folks are here.
Hey guys.
Yeah, Chris, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks for driving all the way up here. Sure. It was a pleasant surprise to see you in person. I was expecting you to be on Zoom, so.
Thanks for the invitation. I hope I was.
Yeah.
Yes, as always.
Down here in Bristol.
Okay. Committee, are you guys okay with, why don't we take a 5-minute break and then we'll just bump up the agenda and move forward and have a little bit longer lunch? Does that sound okay?
That's great.
Do you think we can get, directors and motion here?
He's sitting behind you.
Oh. Yeah.
So yes, I do.
Graham Clark. You too. Sorry, I didn't.
Okay.
Are we-